True Story is a documentary podcast powered by the Institute of Documentary Film. You can find news from the world of film on all the common platforms such as iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, as well as on docweb.net.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jaime Jacobsen, and I am a documentary filmmaker and an assistant professor of journalism and media communication at Colorado State University. I'm really thrilled to be the moderator for today's panel discussion, which is titled Documentaries and Social Media Impact. Now, to introduce today's topic, the digital era, which is defined by constant connectivity and information overload, transforms the way that documentaries are told, shared, and experienced. I'm joined by two Emmy-award winning filmmakers whose recent work on feature documentaries, such as Youth v. Gov and The Social Dilemma, have deployed social impact campaigns to rally audiences around a film and a cause, and have also taken on the topic of social media in the very film itself. So I'd like to welcome Christi Cooper and Vickie Curtis. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, Jaime. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
I'd encourage everyone in the audience to look up these two amazing women. They've done some incredible work. And for the interest of time today, I think what we'll do is just jump straight into the discussion. I thought we'd start perhaps with Christi and your film, Youth v. Gov. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what this project was about and how you've engaged with audiences in social media and digital spaces in connection with this film.
Yeah, so this film is about, it's about 21 young people here in the United States who sued the US federal government over climate change. They claim that the US government has violated their constitutional rights to life, liberty, property, and personal security through their actions in creating and exacerbating the climate crisis. These plaintiffs filed their case in 2015, the fall of 2015, and I was kind of watching the case with bated breath to see what was going to happen. And in 2016, they had their first win in the courts. And that was kind of the moment that I started to document their journey through this. And this story is really, it's kind of a threefold journey. It's a story about these young people and their personal experiences, their personal impacts of climate change, and their journey going through this very present case that was, you had a lot of media attention, had a lot of space on social media, and how this impacted their lives, as well as the deep and dark history going way back to the 60s of what the government has known and what the government scientists, their own scientists, were telling us about greenhouse gases and fossil fuel emissions, and also really in detail following the legal case in the story. So we released on Netflix last spring, and have had a social impact campaign that has been associated with this film that we even kind of started on before the film was ever even released. We did a lot of work in the background. I can go into more of that detail later when we're talking about some of the details of our campaigns. But having a presence in that realm was really important to us. I'm not sure if you want to share the trailer now or share it a little bit into the discussion.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful. Let's play the trailer for Youth v. Gov now so we can see what your film's about and continue the conversation.
Like youth who have come before us in the civil rights movement and other social justice movements, it is often the young among us that shine the light on systems of injustice.
For a lot of young people right now, life is really scary.
Hurricane Matthew hit head-on, and it's just so terrifying.
If this drought gets any worse, our way of life will dissolve. Just as my family's farm is threatened by climate change, so too are the very stability and vitality of our country.
The government is taking actions that are directly contributing to the destruction of our planet.
We have evidence going back to the 50s that government and the fossil fuel industry knew that if they continued to burn fossil fuels, that it would cause catastrophic impacts.
That's when they started editing climate reports.
It's all because of choices that we had no participation in. And I'm scared for my future.
It's the greatest dereliction of civic responsibility in the history of the Republic.
21 young people ages 11 to 22 are suing the federal government
over policies they say are destroying their world.
We are not willing to wait around for someone else's timeline to dictate the trajectory of our lives.
I look forward to standing in court with all my fellow plaintiffs. I love you all.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
Whether we win the lawsuit or not, we are already making ripples in the world to show real change can come from young people standing up for what they believe in.
All right.
Of all the cases working their way through the federal court system, none is more interesting or potentially more life-changing than Juliana versus the United States.
It's such a powerful, emotional watch, just the trailer in and of itself, let alone the full film. And I love that message on the end where you have share, connect, act right there. Just a lot to think about with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey that we released the film in November of 2020 at Doc NYC. And, you know, we are almost, gosh, it's almost 3 years out, and we're still fortunate to be playing at some film festivals and having screenings. And we have a very robust educational packet that we put together with this film. So we have an educational distributor that we're working with, Journeys in Film, and have put together a educational curriculum for grades 7 through 12, as well as a discussion guide that goes along with this film. And it's been really like one of the big efforts that we've made in terms of our social impact campaign has really been to get this into schools and to get in front of young people and for them to really be thinking about how their constitutional rights are intertwined with their environmental rights.
That's really fascinating. Thank you, Christi. I think we'll jump to Vickie now in your film, The Social Dilemma. And I'm wondering if you can just tell us in a way your project interprets this theme in a different way, in that the film itself is about social media and its effect on society. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the story and thank you.
Sure, yeah, thanks. So The Social Dilemma started 2 years before we premiered. It started with a conversation. The film director is a graduate from Stanford, and a lot of his friends at that time were some of the earliest people to be joining the Facebook team, the Google team, the Twitter team. And so he was sort of hearing secondhand from friends like, wow, this thing that was so cool and innovative, and like, you know, I thought it was about connection, and I thought it was about, you know, democracy. It's really more of a Frankenstein's monster and more of a beast, and people really sort of like regretting the direction things had gone. And so we were digging into that to see, you know, is there a story there? Yeah, everybody knows they spend too much time on their phone, or that social media feels addictive, but so what? Like, right, you know, we all know that. Is there really a story here? And the deeper we got into the shadow business behind Google, behind Facebook, the way they make their money, because they don't ask for a dime from us users, right? and yet they are the richest, most wealthy companies in the history of humankind. So where's all that money coming from? What are they really doing? What's that shadow business? And as we sort of peeled back those layers of this runaway tech industry that has their sort of values and goals are totally misaligned with the values and goals of human society, and the system is not a humane one. The more we dug into that and sort of peeled back the layers of the onion there to see what was really going on, the more we realized this was a story we absolutely had to tell. So we talked to a lot of different tech insiders who could let us know what was really going on and how much the companies know what's happening and are continuing to do it anyway, which is definitely a thematic overlap with what we're seeing in industry and government in Christi's film as well. So that's why these films are necessary. People are not going to air their dirty laundry unless we go looking for it. And we can, play the trailer and get a sense of the story that we told to try to get this information out to the world.
When you go to Google and type in "climate change is," you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
That's not by accident, that's a design technique. What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded.
A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you.
I was the co-inventor of the Facebook like button.
I was the president of Pinterest,
Google, Twitter, Instagram.
There were meaningful changes happening around the world because of these platforms. I think we were naive about the flip side of that coin.
We get rewarded by hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth.
A whole generation is more anxious, more depressed.
I always felt like fundamentally it was a force for good. I don't know if I feel that way anymore.
Facebook discovered that they were able to affect real-world behavior and emotions without ever triggering the user's awareness. They are completely clueless.
Fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news.
We're being bombarded with rumors.
If everyone's entitled to their own facts, there's really no need for people to come together. In fact, there's really no need for people to interact.
We have less control over who we are and what we really believe.
If you want to control the population of your country, there has never been a tool as effective as Facebook.
We built these things and we have a responsibility to change it.
The intention could be, how do we make the world better? If technology creates mass chaos, loneliness, more polarization, more election hacking, more inability to focus on the real issues, we're toast.
This is checkmate on humanity.
Wow, that's really a harrowing trailer, Vickie. Such an incredibly complex topic. And I love how it really, one of the phrases in the trailer is this idea of 2 sides to the coin, and hearing these execs talk about like the unintended consequences of this digital world and interaction that they've created. And I'm wondering if either of you would like to speak to this idea of kind of that dual side of social media.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think something that was a big takeaway for me in all the research to write the film is sort of that the game is rigged against us and the house always wins. And so the algorithm that the companies designed that would decide what to show you and when to show it to you is just designed for engagement, right? It's just they're calling it engagement, right? This idea of addicting you to the platform, keeping you on regardless of your intentions to be on for a long time, for a short time, to check one thing, to click somewhere else on your phone, but here you are looking at Instagram again, whatever it is, you're sort of, the goal is to program sort of your lizard brain, your deepest and most fundamental instincts towards repeating the habit of checking. And then once you check, staying. And the algorithm has, you know, trillions and trillions of pieces of data coming in at lightning speed, and it's organizing all that to figure out, okay, how can I manipulate this person's behavior? And it sort of landed on the easiest way to do that is by aggravating your fears, doubts, and insecurities, showing you the most salacious, most outrageous, most vanity influencing content that it can come up with, and sort of finding everyone's individual weakness. And a lot of that has sort of put us all down in different filter bubbles where we're getting totally different views of the world. We're getting totally different definitions of words. Fake news means something to me, it means something else to someone else. And it's in that filter bubble that our behavior starts to sort of be manipulated without us having any idea that that's happening. That's not something that is noticeable to us. So there's like this magic trick going on. And so I think that like our conscious brains are aware of a lot of the positives of connecting with other community members that have similar values to us, etc. And unconscious actions are actually sort of all being moved towards outragification and extremism and things that are going to make us feel fearful and doubtful and insecure. So it's like, I don't feel like it's really a flip of an equal coin because of the game sort of being rigged against us. But like, you know, I think Tristan makes the excellent point in Social Dilemma that like we could absolutely change the algorithm's intentions. We could design this technology anyway, right? We designed it one way, we could design it anyway. And so we could realign the algorithm with humanity's interest, right? We could realign it towards connection, towards deeper understanding, towards nuanced truth. And not to say that these are easy coding problems, but we could at least like try. And so it's like 100% possible to have all the good that social media can do without the bad. It's just not as profitable. So right now we're dealing with like, is there regulation to move it in that direction? And I'll stop hogging the mic now and let Christi add her 2 cents as well.
Well, Vickie, I was just going to say, it's so interesting because I've been kind of working in films around climate change and in the environmental space since 2011. And I would say back in the early days, you know, when we were using social media to prop up our films and get the word out, like it did feel like that better side of the coin. You know, that was 12 years ago. Now, you know, like there was so much movement that happened, especially with young people and in the climate activism space, that they were able to come. I think that's why we have a youth movement around climate change, is because of social media. That would not exist without social media, because there was no other way for all of these young people to find each other and to connect, whether that was through, you know, Instagram, Facebook, they use much less, but Snapchat and TikTok and like all of these other means that they were using to connect and to get the word out. And, you know, I remember filming at the first People's Climate March in 2012 in New York City, and social media played such a big role in getting the word out and filling the streets in New York. And so it's just been really interesting to see that evolution that you're talking about. And I know that it was always designed that way, but I think the use of it has become more nefarious. And it's made it also a lot harder for us as filmmakers to use that tool in a positive way. And like, even just with Youth v. Gov, it is a political topic. Climate change is a political topic. And the use of social media around fake news with climate change and, you know, all of the bullying and bashing that has happened to these young people and to especially young climate activists, but climate activists of color and people on the front lines. I have witnessed now that other nefarious side of the coin and how damaging it really can be. And so as a, coming at it from a filmmaker, it's really tricky to try to figure out how am I supposed to use this tool now, because it's really changed. And we definitely realized even with our rollout and our launch that, there was some stuff that we just stopped putting out there because it just brought on gazillions of trolls and bots and all kinds of weird responses that were clogging our channels. And it was too much work for us to try to weed that out. So in some cases, we really had to actually ramp down the amount of social media that we have been using for our impact campaign.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say, that comes up in the social dilemma, sort of the original Facebook and the original Instagram didn't have an algorithm pushing information. It actually was you driving, onto the platform, saying who you wanted to follow and then seeing the content in the order that it was posted, right? And so there was sort of a more innocent time when it was more of a tool for connectivity or even connection, and it wasn't being mitigated by a third party who didn't have your interests in mind, right? And a third party that wanted to manipulate your behavior or manipulate your mood so that they could sort of begin to influence you. And so yeah, that switch is real. And then, the newer ones, I think Snapchat, TikTok, they've always been algorithm driven in a way that's like pretty scary.
Well, this is really fascinating to hear about just the complexity and nuances and the history of how these interactions and platforms have played out, and their good side and bad side, if you will. I thought it might be useful, given the conversation we've had so far, to take a step and just maybe define for our audience how the two of you see social media use per se versus what is a social impact campaign. And in this case, of course, we're talking about it being connected to a documentary film. But how do you think about these things as applied to your own work?
Yeah, I can start out, Vickie, and feel free to interrupt and join in. I see social media as a tool. I don't see it as the complete backbone of what a social impact campaign would look like. And in my view, a social impact campaign around a film is all around. I mean, there's various ways that you can use a film to create social change, and whether that's through behavioral change, policy change, changing, attitudes and mindsets. Actually, in some cases, there's tons of examples of films out there that really have been able to get laws changed and regulations changed, and they went about that through various means. But in my view, I think the social impact campaigns that are most successful are those that are built around very strong, kind of starting with the theory of change concept, that you're thinking about what is it that I want to change with my film, and what strategies and tools do I want to use to go about creating that change, and not necessarily coming at it from a social media perspective. In our view, social media is really about, it's a marketing tool, and it's about counting eyeballs and viewership in some cases, which do not equate with actual social change. They don't necessarily equate with an impact that a film can have. And so I think it's really important for people to always remember that eyeballs do not necessarily equate change. You have to give these people the right tools and the implementation, and you need to interact with them in a way that the changes that you intend to help create are actually feasible. Vickie, what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, part of me wants to sort of respond in terms of my thoughts on social media, and part of me wants to talk about social impact campaigns, which I see just as very unrelated topics.
Yes.
I know that they're related, but there's so much impact that can happen sort of regardless of your social media presence, right? And that has to do with picking a target, like you said, like if you want to change a law, then is it most important to put pressure on policymakers and or have direct conversations with policymakers and or get your film in front of policymakers who can get you there, who can open those doors, start those conversations? You know, the Social Dilemma did a lot of work to have direct conversations with members of Congress, just, you know, to see the film, talk about the film, talk about how these problems are with the business model. They're not with the idea of connecting online. They're not with the idea of technology. It's not just an issue of antitrust, you know, monopolies, although that is also an issue, right? It's hard for folks to sort of iterate on social media platforms and say, here's a better one that's more aligned with humanity, because there's already 3 billion people plugged into Meta and Google's different universes. So there certainly is a monopoly issue, but there's also a business model issue that just like for as long as the business model is this attention economy design, it's going to drive us off a cliff, away from democracy and away from truth. You know, and social media is a huge piece of the puzzle. The attention economy is a huge piece of the puzzle of why climate change got politicized in the first place, of how climate denial and fake science got an audience in the first place, whether it was through sort of cable news or on Facebook and on YouTube. There's that's like a place where conspiracies have been allowed to spread, and false information spreads, like Tristan says, 6 times faster than true information. So yes, there is like, you can, there's like a conscious way to use social media, understanding sort of that you're playing with fire, and that in overall social media is probably pushing just as many people towards a conspiracy theory away from your message as it is engaging people with your message. But certainly.
And it's also become so siloed, right?
Yeah, right. There's a strategic way to use social media to try to reach those key audiences that you'd like to have. But again, social media might not be that way, because oftentimes what social media does is just sort of like preach to the choir and show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show the people who already love your film information about your film, as opposed to showing someone who might be persuadable but not yet engaging with that sort of climate information. And so, yeah, I mean, like one thing Chasing Ice did, to go sort of back before Exposure Labs did the Social Dilemma, they did Chasing Coral and Chasing Ice. And they looked in the real world and said, where is there a congressperson who's a climate denier, but might be persuaded to change their public stance if their constituents came out and said, hey, we know it's real, we want you to say it's real, and then actually sent a team to that Congressman Tiberi in Ohio, to his district, showed Chasing Ice like hundreds of times in that district, got all of those audience members to write to Congressman Tiberi, then did use Instagram to get those messages to him, and sort of started a conversation directly with him, where eventually he changed his public stance on climate change. But certainly social media alone would not have gotten sort of those results.
Yeah. I mean, we had the same experience with the siloing of what happens with social media, is that it's really hard to speak to people outside of your bubble. And even when you pay for Facebook marketing and advertisements, you know, we had the big problem since even gov, like the word government, was in our film title and was in our log line. It flagged all kinds of political things for us, so that in many cases we weren't even able to run our ads because of how Facebook's model screens, you know, for ad placement. So that made it extremely difficult to even use that tool. But we did something similar to what Jeff and your guys' team did with with Chasing Coral is that, and these are things that the people don't know about our film because it's not stuff that we're doing on social media. But before President Biden's team, before the inauguration and before his transition team was coming into place, we reached out to as many members of his transition team as we could, as well as members of Congress, and shared private links with them of the film to get them to watch the film, because a big goal for us was to get the Biden administration to change their stance on this case and to take real climate action. So there's all kinds of ways, Jamie, as we mentioned, of what those impacts might look like that have really nothing to do with using social media to get there, at least as a tool.
Yeah, it sounds like it's part of a much bigger puzzle, as you both have mentioned, in terms
it has become that.
Yeah, in terms of thinking about, and I guess I'm wondering, for the two of you as filmmakers and as creators and storytellers, is what's sort of motivating you to work in these projects? Would you say that you are trying to affect some sort of social change with your work, or are you trying to do something else? Like, how do you sit on that process?
I definitely would say that I'm trying to create change with my films. I think that's one of the big motivations for me is to create stories that will move people and that will move them to want to become engaged in an issue or to themselves step up and want to create that change. I think we are, as viewers, very motivated by human stories. So for me, creating a story that has a real deep human connection, for me personally, those are the kind of films that I like to watch, are human stories. And I think we as humans identify with those human stories, and those are the stories that end up moving us. So as a filmmaker, I really try to dive deep into the personal and then somehow relate that to the social issue at hand, to bring people along so that they can feel like, oh, they can see themselves on the screen. I identify with this. In Youth Gov, we had 21 kids who are from all over the country, and they look different. They're, of different races and different ethnic groups. And some of them are farmers and some of them are city kids, and, LGBTQ, diversity. And we've had so many young people say to us that was one of their favorite things, is that they felt like they could identify with these kids that were on screen. So I think as filmmakers, we have this huge opportunity to create change through our stories, through those very human and personal connections.
Yeah, I'm such a Youth Gov fangirl, by the way. I just want everyone to go watch what we're doing. But I agree. I think I love storytelling. I think it's so fun to sort of unlock the magic of the footage to find a story that's just good and fun to watch and compelling, and to get to know the characters in all of their flaws and all of their dimensions. Like I'm more interested in stories where there's really intimate access, as opposed to someone is just like a perfect heroic crusader the whole time. But that said, I do think that those stories are really powerful. Narrative and documentary stories are powerful tools for narrative change, and that narrative change is a huge piece of the puzzle to actually affecting real world change, right? There's policy change, and then there's also narrative change, where we bring new issues to the forefront, or sort of like, we have to sort of change consciousness around certain things and change understanding around certain things to sort of move us away from the current track we're on, which I think a lot of people are feeling pretty desperate about, because it works for so few people, and it is sort of driving us towards these climate crisis moments and these technological crisis moments where we have irresponsibly sort of driving off the cliff towards AI and climate crisis at the same time. And so building people's awareness of not only what that really looks like, what's really going on, and the fact that this is not a sustainable path. And then also it models of people who are actually taking action, because I think, you know, we learned so much in school about geometry and algebra and US history and world history and whatever else. And we like never take a class on collective action. Like change making is not actually taught in the United States. Hopefully elsewhere, maybe it is being taught more. At least it wasn't taught to me. And so I think a lot of millennials in my generation, I know a lot of people in Gen Z have an amount of like desperation, grief, hopelessness, because it's like, what do we even do? And there are some things, right? And it's not easy, but there are some things that can be done. So I think people who are modeling solutions and modeling action is like a huge piece to the narrative change of going from sort of just throwing up our hands saying the problems are too big for me to deal with, to actually feeling like, okay, I know how to get with my community and start at least making local change, or having like local, you know, thought discussions around how we can approach some of these things differently. You know, via the social dilemma, a lot of the work we did is related to that regulation level of like, how do you actually talk to lawmakers about regulations that would make tech more free and more humane. And then there's also the like just community level, right? So parents coming together with teachers to say, hey, how do we encourage like everyone at our school to take the wait till 8 pledge, where they wait until 8th grade to get their kids cell phones. And so sort of just figuring out how to organize on that local level in your, how do you talk about it in your family, all the way up to thinking internationally and at the federal level about what actions can be taken. But yeah, so I'm all for change.
Well, I really love this conversation in terms of just all the different ways that we can think about, as you mentioned, Vickie, reshaping those narratives that we tell about ourselves and then we put out into the world. And I'm curious, for the emerging and aspiring filmmakers and other viewers that might be listening to this conversation, what sort of advice would you have for them in terms of what do you wish you would have known about promoting change or action and engagement in online spaces, or deploying a social impact campaign in conjunction to your films when you were starting out? Like, what do you wish you would have known or thought about?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I see you on the edge of your seat.
Well, it's a good question, because I think it's an evolution. I mean, for us, it was really as we were going, things were changing and we were trying to adapt. So even, you know, Vulcan Productions was our production partner, and we spent, you know, probably a year and a half before the rollout of our film, even as we were editing it, you know, really putting our social impact together, our impact campaign together, and identifying, oh, these are the routes that we're going to take, and these are the tactics that we're going to use, and this is the change that we're going to try to accomplish. And then it all falls apart and you have to start all over again, not necessarily from scratch, but you know, you have to also be nimble and be able to kind of affect change according to what the presence is dictating, like what is, you know, what is happening right now in our society that we have to adapt to in order to create this change. And there's constantly new tools popping up. And, you know, as Vickie's film, Social Dilemma, so eloquently showed, there's also a lot of dangers out there. And certainly social media has really changed in the course of us developing our project to where we are now. So it's a really hard question to think about, like, I guess I would really encourage younger filmmakers, and not every film is a social impact film. I mean, I also want to clarify that, you know, there's a lot of films that are just pure entertainment, and they're just really good stories, and they need to be told, whether that's a narrative or a documentary. They're just amazing stories, and they don't all have to be tied to a social impact campaign. But for those that do want to do that, I think it's really important to find attainable goals. you can say, I want to, tackle the climate crisis and solve climate change. It's not doable, with a single film, it's too big of a task to take on. So you really have to break down into bite-sized pieces, attainable impact goals that you can truly accomplish with the resources, the finances, the capacity that you have with your story. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be some mind-blowing, game-changing thing. It could be that you changed the minds of, a group of high schoolers that watched your film, or that you were able to get plastic bags, banned from a single town. Like every one of these impacts make a difference, and they're all part of the larger process. So I would just encourage younger, newer filmmakers that want to venture out into this space to not get discouraged. It's hard, as Vickie probably knows and experienced as well. I mean, you're not only raising money to make your film, you're raising money to run an impact campaign. And that can be really daunting and frustrating at times. And you have to be able to just do what you can with the resources that you have and feel really good about that and count that as success.
Yeah, I think it's great to know that there are impact producers and to go ask the people who have run impact campaigns for other films what they did and who their connections are and whether or not you can also connect to those people, etc. To just build out the network of people who who you can call in to support your film. I think that's a huge part of it. Thinking early about who impact partners could be. So is it political impact? Is it educational impact? Is it in a certain place or with a certain population? And then who are the people who are already really connected in those areas, and how can you connect to them? So the film I'm directing now is called Comparsa, and it's about teenagers who have started a youth movement through arts and circus in Guatemala to use the art and circus as sort of a Trojan horse for their political message to create a social justice movement in a place where direct protest is too dangerous. And there's so much about what they do that inspires me, and the way that they're that they are creating humane systems in this super micro level in their own family and their own neighborhood and in sort of the youth of this community in Guatemala City. I just think is this awesome microcosm that I want to make macro. And so we're looking for who is connected to youth organizations and youth movements and youth education around the world, and connected to Girl Rising, who has connections in 13 different countries. And now Girl Rising's excited about the film, and hopefully we'll be able to distribute it via an education impact campaign to young people who could be inspired by this particular way of taking action to address local concerns, and also bigger than local concerns. But that's just an example of okay, if our audience is youth and we want to get out there to people beyond Guatemala, people beyond the US who has those connections, and then connecting with those people. So it's not you, the filmmaker, have to become a community organizer impact guru. It's good to know about that stuff, but it's also just about making the partnerships with the people who are already connected to hundreds of youth organizations around the world, and then let them be the one to bring your film out to that audience. So I think that's one piece that's really sort of valuable to think about sort of from the get-go, is who those partnerships could be.
That's such a good point, Vickie, because there's so many people that have done it, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And the impact producer, I mean, gosh, when I graduated from grad school, there was no such term as impact producer. And that's definitely something that has, in the last 5 years, just completely boomed. And there's tons of people that are really, really successful in that space, and they are spending all of their time focused on how to do that. It's a great point.
And I would say that anyone who like is just speaking to how to have a big presence on social media is not an impact producer. Look elsewhere.
The clue. Here's a clue for you.
I really love how you both have spoken to different ways that people are engaging and that we can engage in both online and offline spaces. You know, everything, some of the things that just came up, community organizing, impact producers, theater, circus, performance, all these different ways of, you know, engaging around an issue that we care about or a cause or affecting change. And I'm wondering, you know, as we wrap up our conversation today, if you might have any thoughts on, are there any strategies or tips you'd have for combining online action with offline action? Because, yeah, you know, one thing I'm thinking of is there's just so many ways to go about this. Like, how do you sort of navigate this as a filmmaker and as a person who cares about the world and wants to make a difference when you have so many tools at your disposal? So maybe you can share your thoughts on that. Yeah, go ahead, Vickie.
I think online is like a really huge umbrella. Like, this is online, right? This is a Zoom meeting, but Zoom is actually a tool where we are the drivers of the decision making. It's like, it's there for when we want it, and we can pick it up and, you know, have this call when we schedule to have this call, which is totally different than the way that social media works. It doesn't function as a tool. It functions as a manipulator, right? It's like a hammer never asks you to pick it up and to nail this to that. But your social media platforms will ding you and ask you to pick them up and ask you to look at certain things and do certain things. And some of that it's doing totally subconsciously. But I think that, like, in the grand scheme of online, I don't want to conflate things that really function as great connective tools, like something like a Zoom call with people that you want to reach that you're not in the same place as, with something that is has like this third party that's manipulating who sees what you do or manipulating where you put your attention. I do think that, like, there is still a way to have, you know, for as long as these platforms like the Meta platforms, the Google platforms, and TikTok and Snapchat are the commons where a lot of people are going to get their information or to engage with their communities, that there might be a necessity for your project to have a presence in those spaces while they remain sort of the common places that people find connectivity. And so I think that one thing you can do is sort of like have a really informed idea of what you're willing to do ethically in those spaces and sort of create yourself some guidelines around how you're going to use them. So it might be that you will create an Instagram account, but you don't want to actually pay for any promotions on Instagram because you don't want to pay into an organization that's causing genocides, and you feel like that is not ethically aligned with you and your project, and therefore you're going to sort of draw some lines for yourself around how you use the platforms. Or maybe it's that, you know, you are only going to be accessing them on Sundays to post one thing because you need to have boundaries, or else you're going to get sucked into like reading all the comments, or sort of like sucked into some sort of outrage debate that is not serving your time well for actually achieving the goals that you want to achieve. So those could be like personal boundaries you have, or they could be boundaries you have between your organization and the company, and, you know, so many other ways to think about, okay, how am I going to do this in a way that aligns with our goals and aligns ethically, knowing that you're sort of engaging with a beast that does not have your best interest in mind.
I would also add the current project that I'm trying to get off the ground right now, which I can't completely talk about it, but I can share that some of the ways that I think that maybe the online and the offline presence is working really well is I'm working on a film about survivors of a particular topic. And these survivors have used, these closed Facebook groups in order to find each other and to form a community and to be able to organize together so that they can organize offline by going to legislation and going to certain states to testify or going to rallies. And I have seen that as a really effective tool for organizing these folks who don't want to have an online presence, a public online presence about their story or about what they have endured. And also, let's not forget websites. These people are really creatively using websites to document these abuses that have been taking place and using FOIA requests to get all kinds of information up online around this topic. And so I think that there are still ways that we can use these tools in very functional and effective ways around organizing, around information building, and really activating and launching that offline in-person activation presence.
Well, thank you both, Christi and Vickie. This was just so really informative and thought-provoking. I feel like I have so many questions that I want to keep asking the two of you. But you've left us with some really good ideas in terms of, as you mentioned, Vickie, adjusting our own boundaries and coming up with ways that we want to engage with these tools. And Christi left us with some really good thoughts on powerful ways that they can bring people together, often in really important and unexpected ways when more formal outlets for organization or community organizing or action might not be accessible to certain communities or groups. So this has been really, really great discussion. And I want to thank both of you for joining us today and for our viewers for listening. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.